And today is Friday, August the 21st. The year is 2020. Welcome into another edition of the Brian on Baseball podcast. I'm Brian Goudsward. Now, this was supposed to be a show where we previewed the Subway Series, which is always a lot of fun. And I know some people like to throw cold water on the Subway Series, but it's something that I enjoy every year. I love the fan rivalry aspect of it. I love the fact that the Mets treat it as if it's their World Series because they know in a typical year they're not going to get to the actual World Series. And so the Subway Series becomes a matchup that they really get up for, and usually you get the best out of the Mets in those games. But unfortunately, the news coming down yesterday that the Mets are now dealing with a couple of coronavirus cases. There's at least one known player and one staff member, and so we knew that at least tonight's game was going to be postponed in addition to last night in Miami. But this morning we find out the entire weekend series against the Yankees is postponed. So unfortunate news there. Just when the Mets were starting to show some signs of life in what looks to be a roller coaster ride of a season to this point, but they had started to get their feet back under them in Miami, winning 3 games there. They almost blew the last one. It was a typical Jacob deGrom game where he goes 6 brilliant innings. The bullpen lets it get away. You thought the Mets were doomed after that, but then Michael Conforto played the hero with the go-ahead home run in the 9th to send the Mets home a winner. But now, of course, their season is going to be stalled. We don't know yet for how long. We know at least through this weekend, so no Subway Series, unfortunately. Now, a couple of things with the Mets. If they had played last night, they were going to have started Seth Lugo in place of Steven Matz, which is a move that I don't think I necessarily would have made. I think it's a little early to pull the plug on Matz. I would have given him more time. And the main reason is because I don't want to take what's a strength in Lugo as a reliever, by far their best reliever, and take him out and put him in the rotation and leave the bullpen very compromised, because that's what it would be right now. And I know Edwin Diaz is throwing the ball better. Do I have trust in him in the 9th inning that he's going to get the job done? Absolutely not. And I think many fans share that opinion at this point. So Lugo is their best option, and now if you put him in the rotation, he's not going to be a guy who's going deep into games. He's going to give you 4 or 5 innings tops, so I'm just not so sure. I get it, Matz has really struggled. They're starving for starting pitching at this point with all the injuries and ineffectiveness to everyone not named Jacob deGrom, but it's just a move that I wouldn't necessarily have made. So we'll see when the Mets are able to get back into action. Certainly, as we talked about last week, the lineup is performing really well. The one guy who is standing out in the first part of this season is Dom Smith, who's become Mr. Extra Base Hit, doubles, home runs. He's the club leader in RBIs, so he's really doing a good job finally getting his chance following the events of Cespedes opting out of the season, everything that went on there. Smith's now getting his shot, a former first-round pick. The Mets had high hopes for him. Now he's getting a chance to play and showing what he can do offensively and making an impact in this lineup. So the issue has not been offense for the Mets. It's been pitching, and that's probably not what we would have expected during the offseason when you thought that was going to be the strength, but then everyone just got hurt in typical Met fashion, so now they have to deal with all these issues. But at least the lineup is clicking. They're scoring plenty of runs. They're getting on base. They're getting contributions up and down the lineup. There's been a lot of different bright spots, so they'll hope to keep it going once they're able to retake the field, and hopefully everything goes okay with the virus, that it doesn't become a situation like the Marlins and Cardinals where it spreads rampant within the team, and they'll be able to move forward from that. On the other side of town, it's probably a good time for the Yankees to take a little break. Why? Well, it was a pretty rough week. They got swept by the Rays. Now, this is nothing new. The Rays have given the Yankees fits, and the Rays are not just a pesky little team. This is a legitimately good team. They've proven it now for the last couple of years. They've proven that they're here to stay, and they've proven that they're going to be right up there with the Yankees all season. And with the way the Yankees have been hit by the injury bug, they look awfully vulnerable again, and it really just looks like a repeat of what we saw a season ago. Now, they managed, despite having whatever it was, 20-something players, it was just insane what went on a year ago, to still win over 100 games, but you wonder if that kind of thing is sustainable. And in yesterday's game, Gleyber Torres was the latest to exit with hamstring tightness. It's not believed to be serious. Also, the starter James Paxton, who, remember, if the season had started on time this year, was not going to be available. Well, now he's hurt again. I just saw recently they don't believe that's serious, but you figure he's going to miss some stretch of time. Not to mention, we know Judge is down on the IL. Last week I was praising him for his MVP caliber play and being healthy to this point. Well, that didn't last. He's on the shelf. Stanton, we know. And of course, DJ LeMahieu. So there's just so many key guys out of action, and it's a lot to ask of the Mike Tauchmans of the world to step in and keep producing. Clint Frazier has shown what he can do with the bat. He's been great. Luke Voigt, who for some reason is hitting leadoff, I'm not quite sure why, but he's certainly producing. He's already got 10 home runs. So the Yankees are still going to find a way. Would I be worried? No. But the problem is it's just the same kind of situation as a year ago. And remember, this team made a lot of changes with its training staff, thinking that was part of the issue. Well, that's proven not at all to be the case. And it's always dangerous to blame the trainer for players getting hurt. I just think that's a dangerous way to go. But we'll see if the Yankees are able to regroup here. They're going to get a chance to get a few days off, which is a good time for it because they're reeling after getting swept. They lost when they had Garrett Cole on the mound. He gave up a couple home runs early. And look, the Rays just had their way with them this weekend, so the Yankees now find themselves out of first place. Tampa overtook them, and we'll see once the Yankees are able to retake the field, which shouldn't be as long as the Mets, because it's the Mets that are dealing with the virus cases at this point in time. If the Yankees will be able to sustain all these injuries and keep up their strong play, because this team was going great until Tampa came, and outside of the Rays, they've beaten pretty much everybody. I think they're 15-3 against everyone not named the Rays, but they've only beaten them once, so something that bears watching as this American League East race unfolds, and it figures to be just those teams battling for the top spot in the division. Both of them, you figure, locks to make the 16-team postseason. And now moving on to a couple teams from around the game who have had impressive weeks, and I'll start with one that it was more in the category of wild, and that would be the San Diego Padres, who were in the news a lot this week. They swept the Texas Rangers in a 4-game series, but of course the big story was the quote-unquote controversy involving the young superstar Fernando Tatis Jr., which I think was a big to-do about nothing. The fact that he swung 3-0 late in the game when his team was up by 7 runs and hit a grand slam. I mean, at that point in the game, I don't think we're calling off the dogs. It was a 7-run game. It's not like it was a 15-run game. Then there'd be an issue. With the way the ball flies out of these ballparks today, a 7-run lead, especially in a place like Texas where the Padres were playing and the ball flies, that's by no means an insurmountable lead. We've seen teams come back from big leads. We've seen it just this week. The Blue Jays yesterday rallying big against the Phillies to win a second game of a doubleheader. So it's not insurmountable to come from 7 runs down to win. So I just think that was a big to-do. I think part of the problem there was you were dealing with guys on the Padres staff who were with Texas, and I think maybe that ruffled some feathers. There were some words exchanged both sides. Chris Woodward, the Rangers manager, wasn't happy with Tatis. But, you know, you get over it. And the bottom line is when you watch this guy, he is a special player. And one thing that you realize when you watch baseball right now is how many young stars are in this game. You look all over baseball. You look in the NL East where you have Juan Soto and Ronald Acuna Jr., and you have Fernando Tatis, and you have Luis Robert with the White Sox, and there's just a lot of good-looking young talent. But Tatis, there is just nothing this guy can't do. He has 29 RBIs already, 12 home runs. He has a swagger about him. He just looks like he's going to be one of the real special players in this game for a long time to come, and is leading a resurgent Padre team who, as I mentioned, won all 4 games this weekend. And what was significant about that, in each of the 4 games, I talked about Tatis's grand slam on Monday, the Padres became the first team in Major League history to hit a grand slam in 4 straight games. Never before been done in the 100-plus year history of the sport. incredible stuff that they did this week. And Manny Machado was part of it a couple days ago with a walk-off grand slam, and then yesterday the record setter was hit off the bat of Eric Hosmer. So the Padres are one of these teams now that's on the rise. Now, you look at the NL West and you say it's the Dodgers division, of course. But the question then becomes, who is going to be that second team? Last week I heaped praise on the Rockies. What happened this week? They've completely fallen apart. They've lost 9 of their last 11. They're not pitching well anymore. They're not doing anything right. Diamondbacks starting to play a little bit better, but the Padres right now might be that second team because of guys like Tatis and Dinelson Lamet on the mound and plenty of pitching that's coming in the pipeline. The one key I look at for this team is Manny Machado has to be the Manny Machado of old. And so far, I think you'd have to call that $300 million contract a big disappointment. Last year, he significantly underperformed, hasn't gotten off to a great start this year. Now maybe he's starting to get hot after the walk-off grand slam the other day. But in order for this team to take that next step and be the elite level team that a lot of people think they can be in the years to come, Machado has to produce big time, put up the numbers like he did in Baltimore. And there's some things that bother me when I watch him play. We know he's not a guy who's going to hustle. He hits the ball hard on the ground. He's going to be out by 20 feet at first base. That's just the way he plays. But he's a guy who has so much talent, who we've seen at times be a 300-level hitter with 30-plus home run power. That's more what we need to see from him, not muddling in the 250 range or below, which is where he's been now for the last year plus. And I just think that's critical for this team. I don't think necessarily this is going to be their year. I think they have a good chance of making the playoffs. I don't think they're going to take that step of being World Series caliber this year, but I think it's a building block year for San Diego. And they're showing signs. They're a fun team to watch. They got a lot of big personalities. The one area of struggle so far has been their bullpen, which is something that routinely is great, but their closer, Kirby Yates, who's been so good for them the last couple of years, is now out for the season. They also lost Tommy Pham to a broken bone in his hand, so he's another guy who hits atop the order, gets on base. That's a key cog in that lineup that they're without, but other guys have stepped up. Will Myers has gotten off to a decent start, Eric Hosmer producing, so they're getting it from a lot of areas. It's not coming from catcher, where they've gotten basically the worst production in the sport at that position. But it's a team that's doing some things, and certainly a team to watch in the years to come because of all the pitching they have in the pipeline, the Mackenzie Gores that we've heard so much about, and Fernando Tatis, who is really setting the world on fire at this point. There's no other way to say it. So the Padres, a big week, sweeping the Rangers. They went a wild one yesterday. It was a back-and-forth seesaw affair that ended in a walk-off in the 10th on a base hit by Jake Cronenworth, who's another young player who's played very well for them. So if you follow this team, you know good times are ahead in San Diego. Now, they're not the only team in California that's making an impression on baseball in 2020. If you move up north to the Bay Area, you'll find the Oakland A's, and you'll find that they have the best record in the sport at 18-8 right now. And this is a team that's been well built, and it's no fluke now. The last 2 years, they've won 97 games, but for whatever reason, you don't go into the season. You didn't go into either of the last 2 years and say this was a team that was going to be a force to be reckoned with. I didn't going into this year. I was down on the Astros, and for some reason I picked the Angels to win the division. That's not working out well at all. But the A's are playing great baseball again, and they've proven that they are an elite team. And the thing that I like about them is they're playing this well, and a lot of their stars have not even remotely begun to hit like they're capable of. Matt Chapman, who did hit 2 home runs last night, but he hasn't gotten off to a Matt Chapman-esque start. Neither has the other cornerstone at first base, Matt Olson, whose batting average is under 200. He's still hitting home runs, but he's not hitting the way he's capable of. And Marcus Semien, who had a breakout season last year, was great, start to finish hitting atop the order. He hasn't begun to get going. So if this team's playing this well, clicking like this, without those 3 players producing even close to their typical level, the bottom line is this team is pretty scary. And one thing about them, they seem to have a flair for the dramatic. Case in point, last weekend, they're playing San Francisco. They're down big on a Friday night. They rally to tie it. They get a grand slam from Stephen Piscotty, and they go on to win. They sweep that series from the Giants. And this is a team that just has that capability of coming from behind late. They've already hit a couple walk-off grand slams. They're a good come-from-behind team, and you just have to like a lot of what you see top to bottom. One thing I'd like to see them do is add another starting pitcher, and watching MLB Network the other day was kind of interesting seeing a trade proposal of Trevor Bauer, who's pitching great for the Reds this year, to go to Oakland. That would be an enormous pickup for a team that's a little bit short on starting pitching. Now, we got to see if Jesus Luzardo is the real deal. He had a good outing his last start. Sean Manaea was very good yesterday as well. But they don't have that guy, that bona fide ace. And if they got a guy like Bauer, boy, would that be big. Because the last 2 years, they've been one and done in the wild card game. First, it was the Yankees, and then last year against the Tampa Bay Rays. So it's a team that's proven they can win in the regular season, but it's been a long time since the A's have done any damage in the postseason. But this group that they have right now is capable of winning it all, especially if they get a starting pitcher. And if they get one the caliber of Trevor Bauer, watch out. You just might see the A's win it all for the first time since 1989. And now moving on to our weekly segment where we take a look at one series to watch from around the sport. And of course, we would have had our eyes on the Subway Series had it been happening this week, but we'll take a look at another intercity rivalry that's going on this weekend, and that would be in Chicago, where the White Sox are going to play a weekend set against the Chicago Cubs, which is very intriguing on a lot of levels. First of all, both teams playing very well. We talked about the Cubs last week. They've had a couple slip-ups since then, but they've had a very good season to this point. Haven't really gotten a lot of the stars going. Chris Bryant's been dealing with a bit of an injury, but they've had other players outside of the core guys step up, like Ian Happ and Wilson Contreras and those kind of guys. So the Cubs continue to play good baseball, while the White Sox look like they are hitting their stride. And they just buried the Tigers this week. Now, one thing I mentioned last week, and it just shows you how quickly things change. The Tigers, Orioles, and Marlins were all over 500. They all were playing good baseball, and now they're all back to playing how you kind of would have expected. All back under 500. The Marlins are an even 500 at 9-9. But the White Sox took full advantage of Detroit. There was the exciting matchup with Casey Mize and Dane Dunning, each making their Major League debut earlier this week. The White Sox got their bats going. They had a 9-0 win yesterday. Tim Anderson is picking right back up where he left off a year ago when he won the batting title. And like I talked about with the Padres, to me the White Sox are the equivalent in the American League. This is that building block year for this team where they went through the rebuild. They identified a lot of key players who are going to be a part of the long-term solution, a couple of which have gotten long-term deals already, like a Luis Robert. And now it's about taking that next step. And they were busy in the offseason. They added veterans. They got Yasmani Grandal, Dallas Keuchel, added to the bullpen, Edwin Encarnacion, another bat in the middle of that lineup. So they're now ready to show that they can take the next step, and this is going to be a nice test, a fun series to watch this week when you see these two teams go head-to-head. It's always fun when you get these inner-city matchups like the Subway Series and like this one, but when both teams are playing good baseball, both teams come in playing hot. Wrigley Field is the setting. That's must-see this weekend, so I'm looking forward to that. White Sox and the Cubs. As for the rest of the matchups for your Friday, with the unfortunate postponement of the Subway Series, we'll head to Washington, where the Marlins will be. And again, it's always unfortunate when I look at my MLB app and I have TBD displaying for the starting pitcher, so unfortunately I can't give you that information. But what I can tell you is that Patrick Corbin is going for the Nationals, who are under 500 to start the year at 9-12. We go to another American League East matchup where the Blue Jays are going to be at the Trop taking on the Rays. Matt Shoemaker, Ryan Yarbrough are your starters there. Toronto is playing interesting baseball. They swept the doubleheader from the Phillies yesterday, rallied, as I mentioned, in the second game to win. This is a young, vibrant team that's hitting a ton of home runs. Bo Bichette was off to a flying start. Unfortunately, he's now down with a bit of an injury. But another team, I don't think they're quite as far along as the Padres or the White Sox. But in the years to come, with all the bats that they have and the young talent, look out for Toronto. The Brewers are going to start a series in Pittsburgh tonight. Adrian Hauser against Chad Kuhl. Milwaukee 1 game under the 500 mark, and the Pirates right now might be the worst team in baseball. The Tigers and Indians start a series in Cleveland. Michael Fulmer, Adam Plutko is the matchup in Cleveland, and Detroit got a taste of their young pitching earlier this week with Casey Mize starting in Chicago, but they have kind of fallen on hard times after what was a nice, surprising start to the year. It'll be the Phillies and the Braves at Truist Park in Atlanta. Aaron Nola, the top starter for the Phillies, off to a great start. Max Fried, the same, the left-hander for the Braves, and they need Max Fried because with Mike Soroka out for the season, that was a devastating blow for Atlanta, who is a team that has their sights set on winning another National League East crown. Red Sox and the Orioles. The Red Sox have been awful, but they have won now a couple games in a row. They won yesterday in Baltimore. Colton Brewer gets the ball today against the lefty John Means, and the Orioles another team that is faded after a good start. Twins and the Royals as they play for a second straight weekend. Jake Odorizzi is on the mound against Danny Duffy. The Reds and Cardinals start a series this evening from St. Louis. Anthony DeSclafani against Dakota Hudson. Reds were in the news this week for the wrong reasons, and that was because their broadcaster, Tom Brenneman, made a homophobic slur on a hot mic during a broadcast and was taken off the air and suspended indefinitely. We found out yesterday he was taken off his duties calling NFL games this fall, so obviously it goes without saying, not a good situation with that. And the White Sox and Cubs, as I talked about, the matchup to start the series will be a couple of veteran left-handers, Dallas Keuchel opposing John Lester. Fun series. I talked about the Padres, and they welcome in the Astros. Houston's playing great. Got off to a bad start. They're starting to get it going, although they did lose Alex Bregman. We don't know yet exactly for how long. Lance McCullers and Garrett Richards is the matchup in sunny San Diego. Rangers and the Mariners, an American League West tilt there with Colby Allard, the lefty for Texas, matching up with Nick Margevicius, if you can pronounce that, for Seattle. Rockies and the Dodgers from Dodger Stadium. John Gray against Walker Buehler. The beat goes on for the Dodgers at 19-8. They continue to roll right along while the Rockies are trying to find a way to get back to winning ways after falling on hard times here lately. Angels and the A's, and you talk about two teams that are going in completely different directions. These two have inverse records of one another. The Angels at an abysmal 8-18, while the A's, as I mentioned, the best record in the game, at 18-8. Andrew Heaney will try to change the Angels' fortunes tonight, and he'll be opposed by Mike Fiers. And finally, tonight in San Francisco, the Giants welcome in the Diamondbacks. A struggling Robbie Ray will take the mound for Arizona. Logan Webb for the Giants. San Francisco playing a little bit better lately. They won the last two against the Angels. They just called up one of their hotshot prospects, Joey Bart. And I'll tell you, one guy who is a player is Mike Yastrzemski. He's a late bloomer, was in the Orioles system, but he's getting a chance to play every day, and he's producing, and looks like a piece for the Giants in the years to come. So that is your schedule for this Friday evening, and with that we move into this day in baseball history, and it was on this day, we got a recent one for you, August the 21st, 2013, when Yankees outfielder Ichiro Suzuki, that sounds strange to say, recorded his 4,000th career hit as a professional baseball player, a single off of Toronto's R.A. Dickey, that also sounds weird to say. Ichiro collected 1,278 hits in Japan before his Major League Baseball career began with Seattle in 2001. And we'll close today, as we always do, with the ninth inning. A couple notes for this ninth inning. One is a pitching line. There were two standout pitching performances from Thursday. One was Lucas Giolito, who struck out 13 against Detroit. But how about Shane Bieber in a win over the Pittsburgh Pirates last night? He worked 6 innings, gave up 6 hits, no runs, no walks, 11 strikeouts. Significant because Bieber's ERA on the season, a minuscule 1.11, and I think you'd have to say the front runner for the American League Cy Young at this point in time. Indians playing very well. They haven't hit much, but when you have pitching, you always have a chance, and that's Cleveland's motto, and they've been without a couple of their key pitchers because of the incident in Chicago with a couple of them deciding to break protocol and go out at night. But this team can still pitch. They have depth, and once Francisco Lindor gets hot, this is a team that can still make some noise. And then one other note here before we go. I'm someone who likes to look at the box scores, and this was one thing that kind of struck me through this week. The Mets were playing a series with the Marlins, and you might have noticed the Marlins had two relievers that were both named Josh Smith. So when you looked at the box score, in order to differentiate the two, they had to put in Josh D. Smith and Josh A. Smith. I thought that was interesting. One thing also you notice is one had an ERA in the 2s, the other about 10. So maybe that a clearer way to differentiate those two. And with that, that will do it for this edition of the Brian on Baseball podcast. Enjoy your weekend at baseball. Unfortunately, no Mets and Yankees. We'll hope to get that back going sooner rather than later, and we look forward to the Mets and Yankees once again getting back on the field. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Our thanks as always go to Dylan DePrado. Feel free to follow me on Twitter at Brian Gadsward. Thanks again, and so long from Middletown, New Jersey.